Hank, right? Hank,
Yes, good morning or good evening, good afternoon.
where you joining us from?
I am joining from the United States outside of Dallas, Texas. I am a 30-year veteran in sports tourism, mainly in the hospitality side, having worked with a major hotel company prior to retirement a few years back, but have been active supporting the sports tourism industry in various facets. Most recently, doing some consulting work and promoting uh, event platforms. That's the
Okay.
background that I have right now. But I came in during Lou's statement and definitely agree in the United States that sports tourism is the catalyst that's leading the overall tourism business back. And we, you know, from a business standpoint, we need to strike while the iron is hot, because as other markets, other tourism markets and business association and convention markets continue to reemerge, um, sports, as it has in the past, unfortunately, will get pushed aside for the larger corporate conventions, association congresses, and what have you. So while it's great to say that sports is leading, I would prefer to say that it's a catalyst, because we're already starting to see some conflict, and I don't want to come in with any negative from the hospitality standpoint, where hotels are displacing some of this sports tourism business with higher rated leisure business, and it's creating some angst amongst the families and those that are participating. And I just hope that that's not something that we're going to see more of as the economies continue to reemerge.
Thank you very much. Again, I picked something from what you said, and that reminds me of when the pandemic was still very much scary. Sometime last year, um, I, this was during the lockdown, the major lockdown, and I remember um, a number. I live in Lagos, Nigeria. That's where I am at the moment. Um, and I remember that Ikeja Golf Club, Ikoyi Club 1938, these are two major golf clubs in Lagos. And there, of course, there is Lakaway Lakes Golf and Country Club. These clubs were shut down. Of course, everyone was afraid for their lives. They didn't want to contact the virus, so everyone, you know, decided to um, start avoiding large crowd. Golfers were still, I remember very well because I have a few friends in the United States who happen to be golfers. I also play golf, and I remember some of them would leave their state. Maybe there's a lockdown in their state, and they will leave their state to go and play golf in another state where there isn't serious lockdown. And somehow it got me thinking, because for you to leave, can you hear me? For you to leave your state, for an example, if you're living Dallas, if you're leaving Dallas to go and play golf in a neighboring state, you most likely won't be returning same day. Correct? which means you would be having it for hospitality products.
Hmm.
So that means that somehow sports still found a way around the challenges that the pandemic posed. So again, from the hospitality point of view, because I'm very particular about sports holiday, I'm a big fan of sporting events. But I believe that when there are no sporting events, sport holiday takes over. How does a destination makes itself a choice one for sport holiday? People just want to get active. They just want to get active. And during the I remember there's a friend of mine who's quite vast um, in digital business, in digital works, and we were having a discussion sometime last year, and he was telling me how fitness products, started selling more than ever during the pandemic. That tells me that people just want to get active, whether they want to get active at home or they want to go out there and do it. So
Hmm.
how does a destination make itself a choice one for sport holiday? And
Um, I would say, and I'm hope Lou will jump in on this as well. It depends upon what the destination has to offer. I mean, if the destination, um, I would say, with a preponderance of outdoor activity, if they live near hiking or bike, if there's hiking or biking trails, if there's a river to fish in, or lakes to fish in, or oceans to fish in, it's what would, I mean, I tend to, in coaching folks, I say, what would make you go there? If I'm speaking with a destination, why would you go to your hometown? What is it about your hometown that makes you want to go there? What is it from an activity standpoint, a leisure standpoint, where you are, participating in some fitness? Well, it doesn't need to be strenuous fitness. You could be fly fishing, you could be riding a bike, you could be, riding a gondola to the top of a mountain to just look over the valley or something like that. Whatever is going to bring those people to that destination and market it as such. And then what do you do after you've played your round of golf or fished in the river? Are there any other local things that are going to be enriching? Are you in a wine area, a distilling area? How is cooking and food in that destination? Are there any museums or other engagements through the arts that you can look into?
And what Hank is describing is the best way to kind of handle this is through an audit of your own destination's facilities, whether
Mm,
those are tourism related assets or whether those are sports related assets. But having a list of those things that you can develop a very specific marketing strategy, whether that's through your own advertising, through your website, uh, social media outreach. You can use these different assets to highlight, hey, you're coming from around the golf, but we've got one of the top auto museums, to stay an extra night and do a tour of the auto museum. Or it can be purely sports related. We don't have just one of the best courses in the country. We've got two of the best courses in the country, so stay for an extra round of golf. But the best way to do that, quite honestly, is by conducting an audit of those assets you have in your community, and that becomes the focus of how are you putting together a strategic marketing plan to reach out to those visitors, whether it's purely from a sports tourism perspective or just a leisure tourism perspective.
Okay. Okay.
You mind if I add
Paulo,
something to?
please go
Yes.
ahead.
I obviously totally agree with Ank and Lou. I would say that every region has probably made up their minds where they want to invest. If it's either golf, if you're talking about Palm Springs, probably it's golf. So they have a marketing strategy for a specific product and sports product they create. And definitely one thing is major events, attract people at a specific time. Another thing is sports leisure and such as golf, but these are usually seasonal types of approach. So they have a season to play this event. And I think the challenge is, at least what we'll try to do, is approach some of the regions that already have a product and associated with a specific season. You tell them, listen, you have a down season. What we bring you is a new product for your down season, something that you don't have. So that can be something that you add to tourism into a region, is to try to fight these seasonal events that they already, I'm sure, have, and which is what Hank and Lou was mentioning as well. So I think that content and product and creating new products for the off season is where event organizers can bring something to local tourism.
Okay. Anita, can you hear me? If you can hear me, kindly unmute yourself. We've been actually listening all the while to perspectives from what obtains in Europe and what obtains in America. Adid Milola was supposed to be part of this conversation. He's my countryman, and I wanted him to, fill in for African perspective of the whole thing. Um, Coincidentally, I'm the founder of African Sports Tourism Week, the only Pan-African sports travel trade event on the continent. Um, so I'll be speaking on the from the African perspective here, and I'm going to take it from the facility point of view and utility point of view when it comes to facilities now, sporting facilities. Um, and a very perfect example for me is in South Africa, to be precise, in Durban. Um, there is a stadium in Durban called Moses Mabhida Stadium. Moses Mabhida Stadium has about five other activities you can do when there is no football match. You can go ziplining, you can go bungee jumping, and a few other activities you can do there. And that poses the next question, which is about multidisciplinary and utility of sporting events. Professor, what do you think? Because and I'm taking this from the point of view of the 21st century definition of facility management, facility construction and management in the 21st century. What advice would you give to a destination that is trying to, put up structures for sporting activities, so that when there are no when there are no sporting events, the stadium doesn't start gathering dust? What
Yeah,
what would
Matt.
what would be your advice?
Yeah, I think if we go back to what Hank was talking about, and actually firstly, it's understanding what facilities and services are already there in that region. So there'll be a number of places that visitors will potentially come to before they even travel out. So they'll identify that I'm going to go and do this. So for example, I'm going to do a stadium tour. I'm going to go and watch a match at Durban, and I'm going to do a stadium tour of the stadium before or after that event. But then there's also things when a visitor gets there that are not necessarily on their radar until they arrive in that destination. So thinking about all the additional attractions around those areas. So there may be other museums that these visitors may not know about before they get there. There may be these other leisure facilities that can be useful in those demands. But if you look from a stadium and facilities perspective, if you take the context of lots of large-scale stadia across the world, there's ways to extend, well, we've got this facility that we're not using probably 6 days a week. There's probably only a match taking place there. We can have things, whether it be from small-scale business meetings right through to concerts that are taking place there as well. And these regular business meetings, for example, that may take place during the week, can be a great way to maximize stadia use, and actually can turn into a much more reliable source of funding. So as a result of COVID, that there obviously hasn't been the ability for those sports stadiums to do those types of activities. And that is something that sports organizations are looking to redevelop as they come back from this, or to take things online. How can we look to deliver these services and these benefits to our sponsors and to other people through other virtual events that are taking place? And I think so. It's ways to build in additional revenue streams on a day-to-day basis for those venues, and that can be a difficulty, especially when linked to these major events. For example, so if you take the building of stadiums for the World Cup in South Africa, the World Cups in Brazil, well, these stadiums aren't going to be used after the events have gone. So it's thinking about, well, how can we have some local community usage here as well? So can we get local sports teams or in to use those venues to have multiple uses of those pitches? So that could be a way to extend and potentially reverse some of the seasonality of those venues as well. So we're not using that venue for a couple of months. We need to have other ways that are going to either generate revenue or are going to be useful for local communities that are there as well.
Thank you, Professor. Fabian, let me not say how does. What does Barcelona FC or Real Madrid does with Santiago Bernabeu or Nou Camp when there are no matches? What else do they do with their stadium?
Well, they really track with the feelings of their fan. Their fan are very important now for the clubs, and they really are linked with the image of the destination. They are working really hard to be the icon of the city. Real Madrid is the icon of the city of Madrid, also one of the main icons of Spain, and I would say that it's the most visited museum in Spain. So, yeah, I would say from a citizenship point of view, I think it's a pity because we have a lot of beautiful things to offer, more than what the best club in football could have reached. I would say best, but one of the best. But anyhow, there is something emotional which trigger with the tourism. and with the tourist. So we also have to think about these tendencies, because people want experience, and experiences is to be near to the world champion cup, or the Euro champion, or the whatever trophy that the museum of the Real Madrid, Barcelona, or whatever can offer, which is not a Picasso, or not a Goya picture, or not a whatever good art offer that we can also see here in Spain. But anyhow, there's something emotional that we have to know when we design our products. There is always there are always itinerary in these offers. So this is something that the clubs know, but because they also have go to digital. There is something that we have not talked about in this chat, is the digital phenomenon, and how to migrate to a digital tourist or sport tourist intelligence destinations. We are starting to consider all this intelligence in Destiny, to know what the tourists need, to know what the tourists are looking for, and to design the proper cocktail for their experience. And in these football clubs and all these emotional links to the sport have something to say and something to do. But also, just to point a little bit about the tendencies, we have to consider the other important things that are around what people want and what territories can offer, which are the healthy lifestyles, the different competitions of masters and not young people, which means masters who travel just for the purpose of travel and also to compete. But masters are also something important to deal with. And all regarding with multi-sport activities that can be developed in these facilities that were built years ago, and we are not taking advantage of them. And all regarding slow life and extreme sports. All these tendencies are now what people are looking for, and this is sport. This is not just the point of going or attend to a football match. We have to consider that day by day, people are being more exigent and are asking more information to the Destinies. So we are here in Spain. The tourist is it's quite interesting issue. It's a very important point in our economy, and we are working now on a big platform to share what Destinies offer, what tourists want, and also all the small enterprises and business around can be connected with all this data that is going to be picked or generated. So sorry for going from the main question around Real Madrid or Barcelona, but they really are triggering the interest to go into these main cities, but also the tourists need more. And sometimes there is not just only one football match. It's just around with their personality, and we have to know what they really want. And as long as we can share data, public data, we can do that.
Professor, I have a question for you, but before I come to you, I would like Lou. Lou, you can hear me, right? If you can hear me, kindly unmute yourself. Okay, thank you. How does the United States maximize its sporting facilities? You know, for better economic gain. How do you guys do it?
Uh, I guess that's really, from my perspective, a twofold question. So in the United States, I would lump those into um, public and private facilities. And when I say public facilities, those are facilities that tend to be a little bit smaller, but are run by park districts. Um, Many of those are attached to their governments, their local municipalities. So, in reference to those types of facilities, we are seeing an extraordinary uh, building boom in this country in terms of adding more facilities, only because the park districts are so stretched with league play, with recreational play, in some cases tournament play. They just, their facilities are full, and in some cases, if you look at some of the bigger cities, Chicago, for example, they're playing Hispanic soccer leagues that are running games at midnight, 1, even 2 in the morning. So they're looking at ways of expanding those facilities. So I don't, my point in saying that is the issue is not revenue generation on those facilities. They are pretty much at capacity. What you're, I think the heart of your question is more so on the larger private facilities, some of those independent, some of those owned by municipalities. It just depends what that scenario is. And we're seeing a lot of different events, maybe non-traditional events, come into those, where many of our soccer stadiums or football stadiums are hosting concerts, for example, or some of the indoor arenas and facilities have even taken to hosting small consumer or trade type shows. So you've probably seen these in your communities, where it's the garden show, or it's a small auto show, as opposed to paying some of the rents for a larger convention center or something. They're using a smaller arena or independent facility. So they're getting creative on, in many respects, non-sports events, and pulling them into the facilities and figuring out ways that they can increase their occupancy, that they could have a share, a revenue share in the tickets, whatever it is that's occurring in that facility, and generating revenue that way, and also using the facilities that are there. So most of them have, concessions, food and beverage, what have you. They're maximizing those and utilizing those as well to generate revenue. So we're in other words, on the private facility side, we're seeing alternate events, not necessarily sports events, coming into those facilities and increasing their revenue. Oh, you're muted, my friend. I didn't hear your question.
Thank you. So, Professor, how important is research to sports tourism, to the strategy, to coming up with the strategy and the execution of it? How important is research to it?
Yeah, I think it is critical. I mean, there's still an awful lot that's not understood about, particularly things such as active sport tourism. So we can work out why people are motivated to visit places. So in the case of Fabian, some of the things that he talked about in relation to people go and visit Barcelona and Madrid because of they want to go and watch a game at the Bernabeu, and then go and visit the cities afterwards. So I think there's a lot understood about the motivations as of why that people go and commit and go along to those places. but there's an awful lot that's not understood about, well, actually, what are, like, there's different types of facilities and services that people can experience, and it's more about the experience that people have there. So understanding, like, what visitors are going to take away from these events. So when we're thinking about things such as authenticity of the sites that people are visiting, there's an awful lot that's not understood about that. As well as that, things that are linked to football stadium tours, there's an awful lot that's not understood about, what are people getting out of those experiences. So treating, as Fabian talked about, these stadiums as cultural assets, they contribute much more to these destinations as well. And there's an emotional attachment to these venues and facilities for a lot of people. They come here because of the history behind those venues, those sporting facilities. And that's not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily have to be an old venue. It could be something that's brand new, that's been built, that's meant to be the next big thing, the innovative venues that are there as well. So even taking things in the UK like Tottenham Hotspur's new stadium, which is now hosting an array of other events around it, such as NFL events, for example. I think sports tourism is particularly research into sports tourism is needed to not only understand the places where people actively take part in those facilities, but also in the sites that people move around the cities as well. So you'll get people who take part in activities in parks and pitches that necessarily aren't places where people would typically visit. So I think it's much more important to understand those types of sporting ventures as well. And in that instance, there's a lot more sporting events taking place on those public sites. So whether it be parks, we're getting festivals, music festivals, and other types of non-sporting activities as well. So it's really useful to understand how those areas in the city are used, from not only for visitors' perspective, but how do locals engage in those spaces? So I think there's a lot that's not understood about sports tourism, but there's things that certainly need more research, whether it be into extreme sports and some of the other areas we talked about, well-being tourism. So there's a lot more that needs to be done to understand more about the differences between those tourists and local interactions as well. So I hope that helps in some way.
Yeah, it does actually.